So, very first question. What's the nice thing about the very first question, even before you get into the answers? Should you have any confusion about what you read, what does it do? Johnson finds a current law unjust and foolish, so his whole point of view about that current law, which we know being debtor's prison, he certainly does not like. So if there is any time that you need clarity, this certainly does kind of provide it. In modern terms, so in today's world, which of these, A through E, would basically be the modern equivalent of it? A lot of folks are going E, but can certainly see where folks would be going D as well, because in both cases, D and E, you're dealing with being put in jail for failure to pay. Dealing with failure to pay a bill. What makes one more convincing in relation to what Johnson's dealing with?
There, in the passage, they mention nothing of child support.
Okay, so nothing gets mentioned of child support. I would say nothing gets mentioned about credit cards, though. Since we're doing a modern equivalent. But you're right. This aspect does not come up.
Credit card has more to do with the bank than child support does.
Why?
Bank.
Because it's credit. They're
Credit. Yeah. You don't get your kids from a bank.
Banks really don't.
Anytime you use a credit card, what are you in? Technically, you're in debt until you pay it off. So a credit card company could put you in jail for failure to pay your bill or your debt. The answer is going to be E. It's not simply because child support does not show up in the passage that the answer wouldn't be D, but it's not that a person is in financial debt for failure to pay child support. Certainly there is still an issue that needs to be rectified, but you're dealing with creditors and debtors for E, credit card company creditors, certainly would be the company. For D, you're not dealing with financial debt so far as the reason as to why a person's going to be going to jail necessarily. So E still has that debt creditor aspect that D does not. How about number 2?
I had no clue.
I put C.
What? So you had no clue, but you went.
I went C.
You went C.
I just took a lucky guess.
Okay.
He pretty much uses tons of adjectives to alternate pretty good.
Yeah.
And E,
That's
the
why I
reason,
took a
I
lucky
know you
guess.
don't like this logic, but I knew E definitely wasn't right, because they were all read around the same way.
Well, I mean, in theory, I want you to go. This is the right answer. It's going to be naive for us to go. The right answer is going to pop up for every single question. There are some cases where you need to eliminate things. Do you alternate when you take a look at the paragraphs? Does it alternate between long and short? I mean, you do have some shorter paragraphs, but I would agree. You take a look, short paragraph, fairly short, a little bit longer. They are fairly kind of equal in length. I would say the answer you can start to really see in paragraph 3, 4, 5, and it would continue even on to the next page a little bit. To the community, sedition is a fever, corruption is a gangrene, and idleness an atrophy. The rest are imprisoned by the wantonness of pride, the malignity of revenge, or the acrimony of disappointed expectation. When we get down here, why they continue to imprison those who they've been able to pay them. One will answer that his debtor once lived better than himself, another that his wife looked above his neighbors and children, another that he pretended to be a joker and a wit. What's getting used in all 3 of those examples? It is not C. It's A. There's parallel structure. Parallel syntax, parallel structure, parallelism all basically mean the same thing. So you take a look at those, Again, think about, is it in parallel form? Sedition is a fever, corruption is a gangrene, idleness and atrophy. The structure of the sentences are similar. Wantonness of pride, the malignity of revenge, or the acrimony of disappointed expectation. Doesn't mean there's going to be necessarily repetition in the form of anaphora, epistrophe, stuff like that, but does the sentence structure mimic itself? And that is something that Johnson tends to do quite a bit. Same thing is going to happen kind of like on the second page as well. Certainly you still have the rest of that paragraph. Some will confess that their debtors shall not rot in jail. Some will discover that they hope by cruelty. So you still have, that some will kind of repeating throughout. Generally, almost every paragraph has some form of repetition, parallelism that is taking place. That is the dominant strategy technique that he tends to use throughout. Number 3, what's the key word in the question?
Except.
You got to notice that except is in there. First 4 paragraphs, all of the following contribute to the central tone. I would make sure that number 1, you can kind of identify what that central tone would be. If you were to describe Johnson's overall tone towards this issue, what would be words that you would use? Not these words up here, but his overall viewpoint tone. Word choice tends to be negative, critical, argumentative, mad, something like that. So all of those things would certainly kind of fall into that negative category. Of these 5, which one would seem to be the least negative? I would say zealous probably looks to be a possibility. I would want to double check and go to line number 7 just to make sure it's not getting used in some kind of negative manner where things are being twisted. But scarcely the most zealous admirers of our institutions can think that law wise. If you are a zealous admirer, that is certainly getting used in a more positive connotation. So B is the correct answer. I'm not worried how many you got right. You going, I'm sorry, I missed 2 out of 3 so far. But the main thing is, do the correct answers make sense? And if when we go over them or mention the correct answer, you're still going, but I don't see why that's better than D or C or whatnot, that hand needs to be up in the air so we can go over it in more detail. Number 4, I think some people are guilty of overcomplicating the matter. Johnson suggests he was alerted to this problem. Cody's going C. How come?
Well, because like the person says, I was passing, like he was walking by.
And if it's 1758, he's not on a scooter, he's not riding a bike, he's not on a skateboard, he's not in a car, he's not on a Segway or any kind of hovercraft. How are you going to pass by? You take a walk. This is one where I think there is the potential for paralysis by analysis, where you overlook at it, you overthink it, and you overcomplicate it. There are going to be questions, and certainly number 4 would be one of these, that the correct answer jumps out. And the first sentence basically gives it away. If the correct answer immediately jumps out to you, I would say don't try to overcomplicate it. Trust your instinct, trust your gut. No, it's not going to be accurate 100% of the time, but usually the correct answer jumps out for some obvious reasons. And I would say there's another question like this one later on where I think people kind of overthink it, where the correct answer should be pretty straightforward. Number 5 might not be as straightforward as number 4. The word atrophy, line 14, most closely evokes which of the following, or which of the 7 deadly sins. Before you even get into the whole answer options, any concerns about the question itself, or any roadblocks to answering the question? One concern could be 7 deadly sins. This passage is not from a past AP exam. This is like a mimic thing. I don't think you'd have a question like this showing up where it would imply that you should know the 7 deadly sins. At the same time, should something like this happen, I think it is a fair assumption that any of the option choices would still be the 7 deadly sins. So they're not going to give you 4, and then we're going to throw in pride. That's not really a deadly sin. That's the trick one to see if people end up picking that. I don't think a question like this would occur, but I would say it is a safe assumption that the answer choices would all be deadly sins. What's going to be the main roadblock, though, for most people answering this question? What in the world does atrophy mean? Any ideas? or anyways, at least trying to figure it out.
Isn't it like to wear away?
Is that language enrichment? I don't remember what list that one might be.
Like last week.
That's okay. Mr. Kern or Mrs. Burns? Will you think kindly of him? Yeah, basically means to waste away. If you don't know a definition, what should you definitely do?
Context clues.
By
Rereading.
looking at line number 14. So we take a look at line 14, since that's where it's told us to go. Idleness and atrophy. Doesn't still tell us what that answer is, but what is a word that at least is going along with atrophy? We have idleness, okay? And another term of idleness would essentially be if you're idle all the time, not moving, chances are you're probably wasting away or like lazy, if anything else. So if we're thinking about idleness or laziness, greed, lust, pride, envy, sloth,
I just thought of the Goonies, so I was like, my favorite character in that movie is Sloth.
anybody who has gone to the aviary or the zoo has looked at the sloth and realized that thing never moves. Sits on that milk crate all the time in the primate house, at least at the zoo.
He does.
The coolest guy. He's the coolest guy.
Answer sloth. All right. Now, does wasting away help with the answer? Possibly, but even if you're not sure of the definition, still getting that context clue with the term idleness at least gives you, more direction in line with slothfulness. And the term sloth does get used within the passage, which doesn't mean that's going to be the correct answer, but it still gives you further context. Where, like in the sloth and darkness of prison, I think it gets mentioned. I don't recall the line number off the top of my head.
It's very close to atrophy. It's right there, right 17 or 18, right side, first sentence of the paragraph right after it.
Right there. The confinement there for any man in the sloth and darkness of a prison is a loss to a nation. Keep in mind, why is it a loss to the nation? Because the people are no longer, and I think Dylan answered this, they're not working, so they're going to be idle again. So that kind of reinforces that whole idea. Number 6. The prosperity of a people, line that we were taking a look at. And again, those 5 words aren't going to give you the whole context that you need, so you still have to make sure you go back to lines 11 and 12, but it's that beginning of the 3rd paragraph. The prosperity of a people is proportionate to the number of hands and minds usefully employed. What is the double wrong, therefore, that occurs within that concept? Prosperity of a people is proportionate to the number of hands and minds usefully employed. Country needs to go somewhere in order for, you have to have people working in order for a country to go somewhere. What does this law do? Well, where are the citizens?
In jail.
They're in jail. So you're depriving the country of the citizens, and if they are in jail, what can they not do?
Return their assets.
Return any assets to the creditors, so that answer ends up going with A. Any questions on 1 to 6? Paragraph 5. Johnson seeks to understand what purpose this law serves. He discovers the people answer with all the following reasons except. So we got that key word coming up. Question number 7 is probably the one that requires the most time and effort on your part. The only way you can answer it is by going back and taking a long look at paragraph number 5. Paragraph number 5 is the one that's at the bottom of the first page and goes to the second. So these are all, reasons that are offered. Keep in mind, he goes with the term except. I'm going to erase this stuff so we don't confuse ourselves. So, taking a look at the answer choices that are available, you want to have that, you want to be looking at question number 7. If those who thus rigorously exercise the power which the law has put into their hands be asked why they continue to imprison those whom they know are unable to pay them, one will answer that his debtor once lived better than himself. Does that match up with any of the answer choices? Matches up with A. So the fact that once lived better than himself looks like A. Another, that his wife looked above her neighbors, and his children went in silk clothes to the dancing school. That doesn't really seem to correlate with any of those options. Another, that he pretended to be a joker and a wit.
C, punish the fool.
You have C, punishes the fool. Some will reply that they should be that if they were in debt, they should meet with the same treatment.
D,
If the creditor were in the same boat, he would want to be punished. And then some, that they owe no more than they can pay and need therefore give no account of their actions. Yeah, not really. Some will confess their resolution that the debtor shall rot in jail. Not really. And some will discover that they hope by cruelty to wring payment from their friends. That looks an awful lot like E. So, by running through that paragraph line to line, we found a parallel response with E. We found a parallel response with D, C, A. Therefore, you got to go with B. Does that make sense, though? At least we're seeing where those parts align. And no, I know you said earlier, well, you don't want me to do this where I eliminate the wrong answers. Well, for this one, you have to, because basically you're locating the correct answer because you know all of these are in there with the exception of one. So you certainly do have to go check, 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 check. Few people can answer that question without looking back at the passage. I mean, you'd have to have photographic memory to do it. Which is why, if you get a question like number 4, where the right answer jumps out, take it so that you then have the time to take a look at question number 7. And you answered this one already.
Oh, B.
Yeah, he offers a solution. He outlines his solution. This is what we need to do. Number 9 is one that I think has kind of like bugged people a little bit. The word insidious, and this would be when line 69 mentions, he that trusts one whom he designs to sue is criminal by the fact of trust or by the act of trust. The cessation of such insidious traffic is to be desired, and no reason can be given why a change of that law should impair any other. You can keep this part. I know we don't like to do this.
I said A.
I would say there's 2 that people will probably, for the most part,
I
eliminate.
said
Well, which one would people eliminate?
A. Oh.
C.
I'd say C would probably get taken out, and probably D.
Probably.
So that leaves you with A, B, and E. The problem with A, B, and E is they all basically have what kind of connotation? Strongly negative. And if you substitute each word into the sentence, they all work. On the scale of like negative connotation, insidious, low, medium, high, like the degree of negativity. If you're using the term insidious, that's a pretty strong degree. So the question becomes cruel, dishonest, loathsome. Which one is the strongest degree of negativity? E.
That's such like a weird question.
I thought of the movie on that one. Just read
And it's a terrible. I hate using this because it's one of those where, again, if you plug in A and B, you can say the answer is correct. But of the 3, most similar is going to be loathsome. You know, that person's dishonest, that person's cruel, that person's loathsome. That's the strongest of those 3 of I don't like that person. I think 10 is a straightforward answer. I think people over. In the next to last paragraph, Johnson essentially compares, well, you take a look at the next to last paragraph, his opening line, we see nation trade with nation where no payment can be compelled, mutual convenience produces mutual confidence. Well, then of the responses that are there, I'm going to go with A.
You got it wrong.
I overthought it. I'm sorry.
How about 11? Use of we is employed to do what? Invite the reader to avoid debt and family grief, shift the blame, acknowledge his own failure to pay his debts, recognize the need for a collective solution, shift the focus from himself to the debtors he represents.
So I thought it was B. B. B is in B.
It's like we put them.
I said
He was talking about a solution though, the need to fix the problem.
And who can fix it? To fix it, you're going to need multiple people. That's where you go with, oops, I have that more. That's where it goes with D. The argument for E,
So 10.
I would say he's never focusing on himself. And he doesn't technically represent anyone. He's not like their lawyer. He might be advocating for them, but there's never that emphasis on him. Shift the blame from individuals to the government. There's certainly, he does blame individuals, he does blame government. The use of the word we, though, doesn't really do anything to emphasize that shift in blame. How are we going to solve it? We, C Nation, we have now imprisoned, we have now learned, we need to work on this one together. Fundamentally, legal circumstance. This question is slightly odd because it goes back to an earlier part. But he's seeking legal circumstance that provide for a court hearing where what would be happening? The debtor either pays his debt or goes free. It's proven the debtor has hidden assets. He is to relinquish them. Reasonable claim. Creditor makes, then it's paid by the family. And then D and E. In line, looks like it's 46. A term should therefore be fixed in which the creditor should exhibit his accusation of concealed property. If such property can be discovered, let it be given to the creditor. Concealed property, hidden assets, if he has them, then he has to give them up. And then the last one for number 13, fundamentally, which one best represents the paradox that this whole debtor-creditor thing creates? I hear E, I hear C.
A. I don't know what I said.
Sam, here's $20. By me giving her the money, what do I know I'm going to do?
Lose it.
Not only do I know I'm going to lose it, I know I'm going to punish her. Here's the money. Take it. You will now go to jail. Trust and suing, those would be two things that don't necessarily go together. And that's the one that best represents the issue. Creditors are supposed to trust the debtors, but they don't give them an option to ever fulfill that trust.